Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so today we're going to unpack a pretty massive disconnect that is happening right in front of all of us. On one hand, official crime statistics are telling us the story of, historic safety. But on the other hand, there's the reality you actually experience every single day. I mean, we're literally seeing everyday items like toothpaste locked behind plexiglass at the local pharmacy, right? So today, we're going to bridge that gap by looking directly at the data.
And that brings us to the central mystery we're looking at today. We keep hearing all these news reports about record-low crime rates, but honestly, you kind of have to ask yourself, is that the reality, or is it just an illusion caused by a totally broken reporting system? Because to figure out what's really happening in our neighborhoods, we actually have to look at what the numbers aren't showing us.
Act 1, the crime data paradox. To figure out why there's such a huge gap in public perception, we first need to look at the conflicting data coming out of our national sources.
Let's dive right into this paradox. On the left side here, we have the FBI reporting a historic drop in reported crime for 2024. Great news, right? Well, on the right, the U.S. Department of Justice's National Crime Victimization Survey shows a staggering 44% spike in violent crime rates between 2022 and 2024. So, how can both of these things exist at the exact same time? Well, the absolutely crucial word on the left is reported.
Take a look at this chart from the UK's Office for National Statistics. It tracks something called the divergence ratio. Basically, it compares the volume of crime that victims say they actually experienced against what police actually wrote down and recorded. Notice how that blue line is just trending sharply upwards over the last 10 years? This gap between a victim's reality and official police records isn't just a local issue. It's a well-documented, growing international trend. The two realities are quite literally splitting apart.
Act 2. The dark figure revealed. So we've got to ask, where exactly are all these missing crimes going? Criminologists actually have a specific name for this. It's called the dark figure of crime. Now, I know it sounds a little ominous, but it's really just a foundational concept in sociology. It refers to the massive volume of offenses that literally never make it into official statistics. As researchers point out, official crime numbers don't necessarily reflect actual danger on the streets. Instead, they reflect social processes. They show us what people choose to report, what police use their discretion to actually record, and frankly, what governments prioritize. Which brings us to a really crucial number, 27. According to victimization surveys and self-report studies, out of every 100 crimes that are actually committed out there, only about 27 end up in the official police statistics. Just 27. Let's break down how that massive drop-off happens. Out of 100 crimes, over half, 53 of them, are just never reported by the victims at all. Gone. Another 20 are actually reported to authorities, but for various reasons like police discretion, reclassification, or just a lack of resources, they go completely unrecorded, leaving just that tiny little slice of 27 to form what we call the official crime rate. So why do over half of all victims stay completely silent? As you can see here, the reasons are incredibly deeply personal, but they're also systemic. Victims fear revenge from the offender. A lot of people just lack faith that the police will actually do anything to solve the case. Then there's immense shame and stigma, especially when we're talking about domestic or sexual abuse. Not to mention, the court process itself can be completely humiliating, and in many marginalized communities, there's just a deep-seated distrust of the entire justice system. For a whole lot of victims, the act of coming forward just doesn't feel worth the risk. Act 3, the shifting risk calculus. This missing data points to a much larger societal shift in how we look at crime today. It's fundamentally altered the risk and reward math for literally everyone involved. Think about it from the offender's perspective. Engaging in a dangerous street robbery, that carries a huge risk of getting caught or physically hurt, and it's usually for a pretty minor financial gain. But crime has innovated, right? It's shifted to the dark web, to online fraud, identity theft. These are incredibly low-risk crimes for the offender, but they carry massive financial rewards. In a really dark sort of way, committing these types of crimes has actually become the safer career option, totally distancing the criminal from any immediate physical consequences. And the sheer scale of this low-risk crime is mind-blowing. Take porch piracy, stealing packages right off people's doorsteps. It's quick, low confrontation, but when you combine research with FBI data, it turns out that in just one recent year, Americans suffered roughly $12.8 billion in losses from 228 million stolen parcels. $12.8 billion!
It's basically become a massive, hidden tax on our society, and it's fueled entirely by how remarkably safe it feels for an offender to just walk up and grab a box. To understand why criminals feel so unbelievably emboldened right now, we can look at routine activities theory. Basically, a crime happens when three specific things converge: a motivated offender, a suitable target, and the absence of a capable guardian. What we're seeing today is that this guardianship role has functionally vanished, and it's not just about a lack of police on the streets. Think about it. Today, if a bystander tries to step in, or a store employee tries to physically stop a shoplifter, what happens? They face the risk of serious physical harm, massive legal liability, getting fired from their job, or catastrophic insurance hikes for the business. Society has inadvertently made it far too risky to be a protector. Letting the crime happen just seems like the safer option for everyone except the criminal.
Act 4. The police clearance crisis. So why else has that protective guardianship disappeared? Well, a massive piece of this puzzle is the justice system's inability to actually solve crimes, which tilts the scales even further.
Okay, so a clearance rate is the percentage of offenses where police actually make an arrest and file charges. According to data tracked by Pinkerton, these rates have been plummeting. Between 2018 and 2022 alone, homicide clearances dropped almost 13%. Aggravated assault dropped over 10%. Property and violent crime clearances, all down. When criminals know the clearance rate is dropping this incredibly fast, the basic psychological effect of deterrence simply vanishes.
And you know, it's not just about arrests, it's about convictions. Look at this incredibly stark statistic. Only 5 to 6% of reported rape cases actually lead to a conviction. I mean, imagine you're a victim, weighing the emotional trauma, the intense fear of retaliation, and the total humiliation of a public court battle. If you know there is a 94% chance the offender won't even be convicted, the agonizing process of reporting just seems entirely futile.
Which brings us to the core paradox of this entire explainer. We have reached a point where, functionally, committing a crime has become a safer, much higher reward option for the offender. Meanwhile, the burden of risk has completely flipped. Reporting a crime is riskier for the victim, and stepping up to prevent one is a massive liability for a bystander or a business owner. We've somehow created a system where breaking the law is safe, and trying to uphold it or protect someone puts a massive target on your own back.
Act 5. Breaking the vicious cycle. This bizarre imbalance doesn't just affect individual victims, it degrades our entire society. So let's look at the highly dangerous feedback loop this dynamic creates for our public policy.
It operates as a perfect vicious cycle. Step 1, we have low police clearance rates and a totally overburdened system. Step 2, this inevitably leads to a massive reduction in public trust in authorities. Step 3, because they don't trust the system to protect them, victims stop reporting crimes altogether, which just swells that dark figure we talked about earlier. And finally, step 4, because nobody is reporting and nobody's getting arrested, criminals become even more emboldened, starting the whole cycle all over again with even more crime that goes totally undocumented. And here's why this matters on a massive national scale. Governments rely heavily on official statistics to design laws, allocate budgets, and figure out where to deploy police. If lawmakers rely strictly on the illusion of dropping crime rates, they're going to create flawed policies. They'll claim victory while the hidden realities of massive cyber fraud, domestic violence, and totally unrecorded street crime continue to devastate our communities completely unchecked.
Which leaves us with this final thought. If we know for a fact that official statistics only show a tiny fraction of the picture, we have to stop treating them as the absolute truth. The safety of a neighborhood isn't measured by a spreadsheet in a police precinct. It's measured by the lived reality of the people walking those streets every single day. So, how do we rebuild the trust required to shrink that dark figure and uncover the true reality of crime? Well, it starts with looking beyond the illusion. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this helps you look at the news and your own community with a much sharper perspective.